Om Sahanau Sahanau Bunuktu Sahavyam Karvavahi Tejasnavaditam Stomamavishavai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May that one nourish us both and protect us both. May that one make us study full of vigor and strength and efficiency. May we not unnecessarily cow with each other. Peace, peace, peace be with all. So topic tonight is relevant because tomorrow is the 17th of March. And as you know, 17th of March is St. Patrick's Day. And I've tried to link it with Ramakrishna. But as you know, it's also linked with Sister Nivedita. Sister Nivedita, a disciple of Swami Vivekananda, when she went to India to do her master work, and in divine work, because behind it all, evidently that 19th century mystic, Sri Ramakrishna. We've just celebrated his Tithi Puja, his day. And it's curious that in between our own Tithi Puja and our public celebration of life and teachings of this great Ramakrishna, from which all these inspirations stem, is this St. Patrick's Day, 17th of March is supposed to when St. Patrick died. But much about St. Patrick's life is shrouded in stories and myth. And that itself is a great tribute to the stature of the man who St. Patrick recognized as a saint. And the Eastern Orthodox Church ranked alongside the Christian apostles of Christ. It is remarkable in terms of Sister Nivedita, because Sister Nivedita, having traveled to India, found one major obstacle of acceptance, how to be accepted in an area that was dominated colonial British. And she was seen to be one of them on the one hand, and accepted by the Indian people on the other, to do what essentially was landmark work. Landmark work means something in history which we live for and we see the effects of hundreds and hundreds of years afterwards. Sister Nivedita was a player in the whole unfoldment and freedom of India, and that was necessary for the entire world, because today we're living in a modern era where dharma, there's a lack of harmony reigns. There's more harmony, of course, than there used to be 100, 200, 300 years ago. It's only we get news today, which disturbs our mind, because everywhere we look at news. We get news on the radio, on the television, we get news, reading material on the internet, and none of this is good, because the bad sells much more. And people have a curiosity for scandal, so that the headlines of many newspapers and many news channels will be very trivial when you compare it to the status of influx of refugees and sufferings everywhere in the world. But it was the 17th of March, St. Patrick's Day, that Sister Nivedita's acceptance came about, because it was on that day that she met the special consort of Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother Sharda Devi. And that acceptance from a very traditional Indian woman for this stranger, Sister Nivedita, because she was fully accepted by Swami Vivekananda, the Holy Mother, all the divine hand in Sister Nivedita's work. And when Nivedita opened school, it was actually Holy Mother that opened it. and a small donation as a tribute to this remarkable landmark in women's education in Kolkata. But all of this stems from Sri Ramakrishna, who had an impact on his own nation. And when we think of St. Patrick, for example, we think of nationhood. So that tomorrow, everybody will wear the green, everybody will wear the shak, including myself. So nicely this evening. And there's great national pride. St. Patrick is identified not necessarily with anything religious or spiritual, but with a country. And this has been so from way back, 5th century onwards. At the age of 16, Patrick, who was born, we don't know where, some say in Scotland, some say in Wales. I'm going for Scotland, near Carlisle, from various evidences of his travels. But at 16, something remarkable happened. Brought up in a fairly well-to-do family, a Roman Briton. Roman Briton means that the Romans had been there and they had established Roman lifestyle and the Roman style in the form of villas and trading organization had a great impact on the land of Britain. But of course, because of threats there on the continent, the Britons had to leave. But we are told that Patrick was part and parcel of that Roman influence. But he was abducted. He was taken by bands of renegades and taken as a slave in the most appalling conditions. One account, a biography, says that the treatment of any captive in those days for the slave market would have been anything but humane. And Patrick himself recalls in the two pieces of literature that reliably demonstrate all the different times and events in St. Patrick's life. And he recalls her experience, hunger, nakedness, being near the point of collapse. The slave was just cargo. And he was sold and eventually himself working for a farmer, and where conditions initially at least not have been very much better than that of a slave. So we can imagine him, and he doesn't register himself in any way as religious. But his family was. Father was as a deacon in the Roman Catholic Church. Well, in those days, no same with the Christian church of that time. So he had this, but registered. I wasn't the least interested in that kind of thing. But at the age of 16, he abducted, and the impact was there for life. Feeling vulnerable. For years, he remained away from his home, his friends, his family, from familiar surroundings. Coincidentally, at the age of 16, thereabouts, Ramakrishna was taken to Kolkata. And he too had a spiritual awakening, or the commencement of a spiritual awakening, for which he's so well. But of course, he was interested. He was interested in the life of the spirit. He was interested in finding out what was truth. But of course, Ramakrishna was a remarkable individual. We can see him as a great grand wave that has an impact, not only ultimately on the freeing in terms of spiritual life, the freedom that we all seek, the freedom for which we are born, this ksha, but also the capacity to reach the whole world by releasing that nationality that held the cultural heritage of this deep spirituality, that has the capacity to unite the whole world in today's world of turmoil, It is this uniting philosophy of Vedanta that can unite everybody, provide the undercurrent for truth. And so national liberation seemed to be part and parcel of the divine plan in some way as well. And in this way, St. Patrick also becomes the symbol of Irish freedom and nationality and independence, exhibiting great traits, same traits Ramakrishna had of courage, of independence, freedom of thinking, exploration, inspiration. St. Patrick doesn't immediately have a change of heart. But being alone suddenly gets an inspiration. Suddenly he gets connected with this God that he's been estranged from. And he gets the inspiration and a vision. Please go to the port, there you will find a certain boat, and that will take you back home. He travels some 100 kilometers an hour to get to this and leave port. He finds a boat, actually discovering the port, finds a boat waiting there, and the boat used to take him. And so he's about to turn back, very despondent. And all of a sudden, they call him and take him away. There are some accounts that they take him really to France. So he's going to Britain via France, and he lives another 16 days in captivity. And there he's inspired by a monastic life there. So some accounts will say. In any event, he makes his way to deep forests. The land of Britain was not a hospitable place these days. In the 5th centuries, St. Patrick was born probably in the late 4th century. So he's finding his way home. Eventually reconciles himself at last with friends and family. We imagine what great joy his family has on this reconciliation. Ramakrishna finds himself in the Kali temple. He starts an into spiritual life of sadhana that lasts some 12 years. He also has a phase in his life, having completed this, he now has the urge to convert people. But this is not the kind of conversion that has any coercion in it or any force. It is a discovery of willing souls that are ready for their evolution, and he acts as a catalyst. And he's not looking for those who are interested in the flowering of their spiritual life. He's looking for those who advance it in others also. St. Patrick too, he having returned home with no intention of going back to Ireland, but having certain skills. By now, he knows the culture and the language of the Irish people. And while he in later life writes 2 pieces of literature, we can see he is not the most learned scholar. Scholars today, reading his works, have their heart moved by his sincere language. It is the heart and the Latin he's using of necessity, because nobody has a written language. The only language at that point is Latin. And it's not the old classical Latin. It is colloquial Latin. And he learned Latin by pursuing a dedicated life. He pursues it like Ramakrishna as a priest. So he goes off to France. And his learning is sufficient for him to go back to Ireland. He's inspired to go back with a vision. He's called across to a certain place, which we assume is the west of Ireland. Sri Ramakrishna too gets this revelation and also has a life calling. Saint Patrick goes back. We think he's land and water fit. So scholars today say. And didn't get good or kind reception there. And from there, he goes on to a place maybe near Skis, further up the coast. From there, it seems he goes across just to where he was isolated looking after sheep in a cold and lonely place, erratic weather, facing the back of the Atlantic Ocean. And there he finds his heart and soul in the Irish people. So St. Patrick actually is the most famous immigrant to Ireland. And yet the inspiration, Irish nationalism at the end. It is a lesson to every migrant in a country to learn and absorb the culture as much as they can of the countries they live. To try to understand, to try and communicate with an empathetic ear, and try to see how do the others think, and what is the way in which they express themselves. Unfortunately, the Irish language, which is the first language of Ireland, is in decline. It has been in decline from time. The sockets of the western coast of Ireland would still speak Irish in their own particular dialects. We have here tried to learn a little of it, unfortunately not successfully, but we will continue. Because although it is a language that is limited in many ways, nationally, for it is regionally national, there's no, which is much more broadly spoken. Today, of course, the Chinese language is very handy, French is handy, Spanish is handy, and of course English is handy. But still, we find links for it. It is an Indo-European language. And evidence of Indo-European culture in the Irish culture. And there again, we find this link, not just to Ramakrishna, but all its sages of India. Ramakrishna was the modern sage, a kind of revival of the ancient sages of India, leaving his mark for thousands of years to come, and presenting us with a new aspect, a revived new aspect of this ancient cultural religion that we read today in Vedanta. Not only espousing through Swami Vivekananda clearly the four paths, the four yogas, the four practices corresponding to the human psyche, but also opening up for an uplift of humanity, honoring the womanhood of mankind, and presenting a universal philosophy that is adamant about harmony, the harmony of hearts, the harmony of religions. In this way, St. Patrick also goes about his work harmoniously, with no sword. He, unlike others, never took any bribes from the royal house, became unpopular, and he didn't convert anybody in Ireland instantaneously. It was a long, slow process, but he dedicated his whole life to it, with faith and conviction, against what he saw as barbaric ways. And these barbaric ways, of course, are reflected in the band of people who came and took him away as a slave. Look at his empathy for other slaves and for the poor. But he manages to convince many. He manages to convince the Druids in the Celtic culture in Ireland. And he manages, like early Christian pioneers before him, who mainly operated probably in the southern part of Ireland, and his work being very largely in the northwest Ireland. That's the northern part. we know his remains are there in Patrick, we say, and there was a tug of war out getting the remains and putting in places, Armagh being one. But it seems we find them now in down Pat, along with the remains of Saint Bridget and then Saint Columba, I think it's Columbanus as well. So 3 great missionaries in the country, converting the existing wells to Christian holy wells, converting the myths of Ireland to Christians, converting through generosity, kindness, and sincerity, love. These were the concrete tools that St. Patrick had. Creating monasteries with monks and nuns in the Celtic tradition, and over 100,000 baptized people, so it was said. So this is life of St. Patrick. In parallel to that, what does Sri Ramakrishna do? He has again these profound experiences, and again he inspires but his inspiration carries on. The St. Patrick's inspiration carried on for centuries, and so throughout the world, conquest that the Vedanta has made through the teachings of Ramakrishna, Holy Mother, and Vivekananda, his voice piece, has traveled throughout the entire world in a very short period of time. Even so, St. Patrick's reputation grew. It had impact in the 15th century already. By the 7th century, St. Patrick seemed to be the patron saint of Ireland. And it is still seen this way. Identified thoroughly as Irish, even though he was a Roman Briton. Still, his name suggests that he was Celtic in some way, because we find Patrick in Welsh, suggesting that he may have had his home in Wales, and others suggesting he was in Scotland. When he did return to Britain, when he returned to his home, it took him some 8 days to find home. And if you calculate through dense forest and getting lost and so on, maybe an average of 3 kilometers an hour, you say it's quite a distance. And so we took it out, of course, or not. It's not really important. We study the lives of these saints so distant in our time, and Sri Ramakrishna so close at time, we cannot be moved by all their qualities. And we cannot help but be inspired by their various virtues. Let's go back, Patrick. You see the firm determination he had, going back to the land that he was captive, and tell us that he escaped, in one language, by the skin of his teeth, just because you see, had he captured or recaptured, having run away from his master, it would not have augured well. He would have been dealt with in a very cruel way. There's some of the other things around that time and conditions. While he was owned in Ireland as a slave, he had no help, but then he felt he had help from the Holy Spirit. And his memory of childhood religion, memory of stories and sayings from his spiritual, the Gospels. With those two things, he would enduringly convert. To describe such a personal experience, we can just gather together a few hints from his own writings. He says in his book Confessions, "I did not know the true God," he says, "but lay in death and unbelief, to no thought for my salvation." And then he says, "The Lord opened the understanding of unbelieving heart, that I might recall my sins and turn with all my heart to the Lord my God. In contrast to this, Sri Ramakrishna, the only sadness he feels is that he doesn't get full vision in the Divine Mother of the universe at Dakshinaswar. And he is not satisfied with one path, only one path. He has the kind of experimental temperament that is to explore every attitude and every avenue to find out the truth for our benefit, showing the universality of every path, so many faiths, so many paths, but still fired up with this conviction. And the only proof that we have is personal experience. Very often, there's an argument today between Gnostics and agnostics, and a third party, believers. What's the difference between all of these? An agnostic is basically somebody who says, I don't know. And most atheists are agnostic. Even those who declare, I'm atheist, will say, in all probability, there's no God. And they're looking at things from a material point of view, pretty much. That's their philosophy. But even the most adamant of atheists will have a ranking out of 10. I think the probability of it existing is 7 to 10, 70% chance that it's not there. It means 30% is uncertain, agnosticism. Swami Vivekananda has a very important definition. Nowadays, the new definition for atheism, if you do not believe in yourself, because the foundation of man, according to Vedanta, is your own internal self. At the most fundamental level, that self there. And what we might call blissful base is there. What we are looking for externally is deep inside, and we are spirit. We alone are spirit. In contrast to that, there's some theological positions that say that you are a body with spirit. But Vedanta says, I'm a spirit with a body. Also relate to the body. The body on one side, identified as I and me. On the other side, all kinds of people and places that evoke a reaction within me on the basis that I have survived. If I realize I am a temporal entity with my mortality clear, and as it advances, seeing the mortality everywhere, I see that at some stage or other, this mortality catch up with me. So naturally, I want to cling to life. Not realize that the very reason I want to cling to life, the reason I don't want to die is because I am existence itself. It's impossible for me to die. I am that which is fundamentally the same and unchanging, regardless of any time, space, anywhere. And Sri Ramakrishna teaches this. And other paths it in their own way too. By teaching in Ireland a path of simplicity, a path of refinement, a path of commitment, a path where poverty is seen to be closer, a situation that is closer to against kings and rulers that may have been tyrants. Gently, systematically, he persuades, by contrast, the roughness on one side, smoothness on the other, the warful tendency on the one side, and love and peace on the other. And he manages to win all the hearts. So the same way, Sri Ramakrishna, through pure love, wins the hearts of everybody, even those who cannot accept initially his realizations and teachings. These realizations and teachings were in contrast his own students, his own young people who were all within the purview of the Brahma Samaj. The Brahma Samaj was interested in images. They weren't interested necessarily in the kind of personal God that had form, influenced as they were by colonialists who inferred that anything to do with image and rituals and all these was really something that was rough and crude, something that was beneath the colonial superiority. And their simple, straightforward Ramakrishna from a village brings back the old Hinduism, the old way, and conquers everyone through love. He very embodiment of love. When Naran, who became Swami Vivekananda, in dire straits at his worst, he was able to say, "Nobody loved me more than my master, Ramakrishna." The very embodiment and expression of love. Saint Patrick, it seems, had the same quality, conquering, as say, through love. And remarkably, we know very little about Saint Patrick. We know a number of legends. Of course, we all know that Saint Patrick seemingly abolished all snakes and serpents from this island of Ireland. Of course, the truth is that there never were any. But he was reaching out to the very horizons of the known world. And Patrick looked out across the Atlantic. He didn't know America's there on the other side. From point of view and everybody, the land of Ireland was the last edge of the world. Nothing more after that. The Romans who so ably conquered Britain were fearsome of this land of Ireland. They never came to Ireland. They heard stories, and you couldn't persuade any of the Roman soldiers to cross the George's Channel or the Irish Sea across to Ireland because of the reputation was there. It was known already. Ptolemy had already mapped out the places in Ireland. But this is a land where allegedly were there, casting spells and magic, a land of darkness and monsters and dragons, and today we might say leprechauns and others. So this world that the Romans didn't want to associate with, they had nothing to do with it. And they never knew about the current geography of the land. St. Patrick, as I say, says, "The Lord opened the understanding of unbelieving heart, that I might recall my sins and turn with all my heart to the Lord my God." We can analyze that. First of all, open my understanding. This has to happen with all of us. As long as our hearts, that is, as long as egocentrism is our main concern and occupation, our hearts are closed. And in the guided meditation earlier, there's an attempt to show how internally there can be progressive openings of consciousness progressively happening. And when we do that, things become more immense, more truthful, more expansive, more subtle. So the phrase opening the understanding is a very profound phrase. Ramakrishna found this also, that every step in his spiritual practice was an opening. And even understanding the broadness of the different paths opened up his practical understanding of the methodology of religion. My unbelieving heart, now he mentions various categories. One is the unbeing entity that calls himself atheist and is in fact agnostic. The other one declares, I am Gnostic. I know. These are very few and far between. Sri Ramakrishna can declare, I know. Then if you ask, how do you know? He says, well, I went on an internal journey, not the external. I didn't find it on the outside. Just as the ancient sages, the rishis never found the truth on the outside. They always found it on the inside. Examining the outside in a scientific way, they found any answers there. Only temporary ones. The hows they found. Just as modern science today is finding out how this works, how that works. Mechanistic understanding only. What is the fundamental why of it? What is the fundamental source of it? Unknown and unknown. So if an agnostic challenges, say you know, Gnosticism, we contrast with that. If I want directions to a place and I ask somebody, do you know where it is? They say, no, I don't know. It means their job is finished. You can close the casebook. They can walk away. But somebody says, oh, I know. You go here, you go there. Then the question is, how do you know? It's because a different method was used. Used a method of inspiration, method of internal enlightenment. And inner light showed the way. An open happened. And the only proof is my direct experience. So that's the Gnostic. Agnostic, Gnostic. Then there is the believer. The believer hasn't really explored the inner fully. They believe on the basis of faith. Somebody told me. And that has subcategories. Kind of category that says, I believe, I will not question. A superficial belief only is there because the proof of it is not there. The evidence is not there. I believe because somebody told me, because these are the rules, these laws, these are the ritualistic obligations. In order to get this, to do that. No questioning about it. But thinking people in the ancient world questioned these things. And we should also question these things. Doubt is the first step in this. But then how do we cure the doubts? We take provisional truths and then we explore them through practice in depth. And so that kind of believer really is as good or bad as the atheist. Imagine now the only qualification to get truth. These are twofold. First of all, sincere truthfulness. Secondly, selflessness. Even without belief in God, these two methods will enable you to discover everything that the theist would discover through sincere love of God. It has to go beyond the belief horizon, and it has to go deeper with the faith. And so his understanding, St. Patrick's, was unbelieving heart, that I might recall my sins. That is, that I might recall, have a sincere appraisal, a taking of stock. All of us have to do it. All of us have to take stock of the depth of our ignorance. When we think that we are the body, this is ignorance. It's not the truth. We are spirit. When we think of the mind, this is ignorance. What is our malady? Ignorance. What is our remedy? Knowledge. How do we get this knowledge? We get it on the basis of thoroughly discern. We discern what is real, what is unreal, what is enduring, what is subject to momentary time, what is lasting, what is fleeting, what is a higher value, what is a degrading value. And on the basis of that, an automatic detachment occurs. If it is true that I am not the body, then an automatic detachment comes. If I say I am not thoughts, the feelings go through a mental field, then I'm automatically witnessing what is being presented. And so we are suffering from forgetfulness. And every moment forgetfulness will give us suffering. And every moment remembrance will give us peace and joy. That I might recall my sins and turn. What? Here's a beautiful phrase. With all my heart. That means with all my mind, with all my energy, with all my muscles, with all my physical capacity, with all mental capacity, because that must be a central purpose in my life. And why don't we find it? Because all that energy is normally dissipated with all kinds of other things. Things which are largely trivial. And then where will you turn your heart? It says, to the Lord, my God. Now these phrases are important. One of the primary Upanishads we have is Isha Upanishad. Isha Vasham Idam Yatkinchat Jagat Jagat. But all of this is covered by the Lord. That is seen to be a supreme entity, acts as a diffuser, a protector, a creator, a dissolver. But principally something that covers everything. Like insurance, we take out insurance, we say we're covered. We don't have to worry anymore. The purpose of insurance is to remove our worry. The purpose, understanding that there is a Lord taking care of everything and running everything rhythmically flow, is cause for us to take our worry, put it aside completely. But we have to see that entity, not just above, but below, left, right, in every direction. Seeing the self in all, and all beings in the self is the formula. So this phrase is, my God. My God, some entity belongs to me, making that my very own, not a stranger. We start our spiritual life thinking that God is outside our small circle of I and me and mine. And then as we get closer to that, we bring that God inside the circle and say God inside. And then as the truth dawns, the boundaries of the circle get dissolved completely. I and the Father become one. The reality of that experience was woven into the remainder of his life, says this text. And near the end of his career, casting an eye back, he could say that from time on, the love of God and the fear of that is direct, that is the understanding that God is moving everything, has grown, and up to this day, by favor of that one, I have kept the faith. That is I have kept and maintained the absolute conviction, unwavering conviction, that everything is run by God, governed by God, infused by God, preserved by God, protected by God, and ultimately that everything is within, and that is within everything. Interestingly, says the text, he never showed bitterness showed any bitterness towards God with regard to his capture. He never blamed that entity for that. And reviewing his life, he may well have blamed himself for his own capture and for his sufferings. The same thing as we take personal responsibility for all our fate, making us non-fists. So this disaster to bring to trust in his personal ideal of in the form of Christ. He was a Christian. And as his faith began to grow, one immediate result of this newborn was an urge to pray. Some people say, what should I do? You have to pray. It's like an obligation and a chore. From him, it was an urge to pray, a necessity. He records that he lived his heart to God while at work. Doing his work, it was lifted. Out of the woods or mountainside, as many as 100 times a day. Holy Mother tells us that we should repeat our mantra thousands of times. If you're idle and have no work to do, at least you can do japa. At least you can make this recollection of this one reality, this one truth that is always hearing. He rise before dawn for prayer, in snow and frost and rain, and felt no ill effect. Now we can see that an advanced soul like Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa lived continuously in bhava mukti. In this mood of bhava continuously there, he lived. There was a moment when he was disconnected with this entity that he registered in the form of the Divine Mother of the Universe. And that he voluntarily, or he had the capacity to step into the Nirvikalpa Samadhi, the Samadhi where there is complete and total freedom and formless, where only that one exists, one without a second. Again, St. Patrick, looking back, attributes health and energy at that time, with all the hardships he went through. He still registers health and energy to the fact that the spirit was glowing in him, is the term he uses. Holy Mother used to say how Ramakrishna's skin was golden like the amulet he wore, how his skin would shine in golden. And Jesus says you cannot hide light under a bushel or a bed. Now all these saints are portrayed with a good aura around them, indicating a kind of magnetic flow of light that emanates from inside them. So the spirit was flowing in him, and that attracted people also toward him, just as Ramakrishna was a magnet, as it were, was the queen to which all the other bees were attracted. What day those must have been? St. Patrick had an encounter with the one who was sent to proclaim freedom, prisoners, and to release the oppressed, says the gospel. Patrick was still a slave, but he's free in God. So that's a wonderful story. In the days following Patrick's conversion, immediately, there was no divine deliverer that magically came to restore him. In other words, it's all of the clues, all of the material ways to his freedom. They were all found in a natural way. He had to walk. He had to sit in a boat. He had to endure all the things we all have to endure, because these are means toward our freedom. But now, if we look at the metaphorical aspect of this, we see that this metaphorical aspect can be seen in many religions. Let us take, for example, the foundation of all the Abrahamic faiths, the Jewish religion. How there is this of enslavement, an entire people, chosen people, going from Egypt, where there was through the land, the land that, metaphorically speaking, was described as milk and honey, the land of milk and honey, a land of bliss. That is going from the enslavement of what we have to now, the corporeal enslavement that we have and feel. If we didn't have it, there would be no urge for freedom. In different language, happiness, peace. These are different words for freedom. We want to be free. So he was captive as a slave in ignorance. Then he had the urge for freedom. And then he got the freedom. And then he went back to show others the freedom. That's the legacy of Patrick. Compared now, Sri Ramakrishna, that's the same thing. With his 12 years of sadhana, he was able to be the expert in every path you think of. He was able to assert from his own personal experience directly that all religions are true, all paths are true, all paths are valid, and was able to indicate beyond the borders of that, through the uplifting and arousing speech of Swami Vivekananda, and through the great example of the mother, his constant Sarada Devi, able to demonstrate the holistic aspect of what will give people their freedom. Ultimately, political freedom. This is why Sister Nivedita carried on work of Vivekananda, who never directly indicated anything about political freedom. He avoided. Seeing that freedom is found in the discovery or rediscovery of the Indian national culture that is fundamentally spiritual. The discovery of the rishis. It is found in the Vedas. It is found in the Upanishads. It is found in the Bhagavad Gita. And briefly brought together in the Vyasa Sutras or the Brahma Sutras or the Vedanta Sutras. These form the Prasthanatraya of the Vedanta. And then we can see in 4 decades, 4 or 6 decades, in a few decades, the shackles broke, the freedom was gotten. But what will we do with opportunity for freedom is entirely up to us. We have all the working parts placed for it. So these are some brief comparisons between St. Patrick and between Sri Ramakrishna. Their own way, emphasizing freedom. In their way, indirectly bringing about national uniting consciousness, so that on St. Patrick's Day, every Irish person in Ireland and beyond, throughout the entire world, will register some national pride in St. Patrick. But it's more than just pride. When we see the social dimension of it, we can compare Ireland to India, Ireland being ultimately the land of saints and scholars as it became. Through the great lives, the great monastic movements, the lives of monks and nuns who were established in Ireland through the likes of Patrick. That's on the one side. And then on the side, the uplifting universal message of the Vedanta for the whole world be spread. I don't think it's an accident that we have a Vedanta society in Ireland that is the land of saints and scholars that can again revitalize the spiritual life foundation initially in Europe and the whole world, just as those great pioneering missionaries did in Ireland itself. And if we want to take on more than just the social or superficiality of patriotism and go deeply beneath, we will find that the most patriotic thing that anybody can do is to express the word freedom in every respect. Material freedom, psychological freedom, emotional freedom, gender freedom, if you will, and freedom of humans, freedom in terms of human rights, equality, all of these kinds of things. But most fundamental, none of it works until you assess and acknowledge the inherent freedom that you already have, and that these great saints and these great mystics can indicate directly for us. With these words, please enjoy your St. Patrick's Day tomorrow, 17th, where 2 events happen. One, a commemoration of St. Patrick, who died on that day. Second is the meeting of Sister Nivedita with the Holy Mother on that auspicious day. And we can even say the meeting of Ireland and India. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace be unto all.